So behind me here we have our YMS trial that we have here at the Baldwin Knowledge Plot. So this whole plot's done with 4296 Double Pro. It was planted May 23rd, 2022. There's 180 pounds of nitrogen applied to this plot, accounting for soybean credits at 40 pounds. So the products we're going to highlight in here today are going to be Envita, IONfx, and then NutriQuire. So on the first thing we've seen or noticed, I guess, between all of the treatment trials from the check is that we see a noticeable reduction in firing, whether that be from potassium from the drought or nitrogen, just because we're not able to get that nitrogen in the plant because of the dry conditions here. Invita is probably the most noticeable. We have lost the least amount of leaves in the bottom. We get a little bit bigger ear set. It seemed to flower a little bit earlier in the season by a day or two. And what that does is leads to a little bit quicker grain development, especially when we're in those drought stress conditions. Those plants have kind of stalled out. We're also seeing that with the IONfx. The IONfx did come out a little bit faster in this plot, as well as we had a little bit more of a fibrous root system early. We can continue to see that root system increase in those braced roots, especially above the ground. So that's kind of the main things we've been seeing. The NutriQuire, like I said before, we have seen a reduction in firing. Seems to be right on par with maturity with the grain check, but just kind of overall there's a pretty good difference that you can visually see as you walk through these plots. So here I am in the check of 4296. As you can see, we are fired up the plant from potassium firing from drought, anywhere from 2 to almost 4 leaves as we get back in there. And this is pretty consistent across all rows, the whole length of this plot, which is about 600 feet. So, like I said before, we're in extreme drought conditions. If you look at the soil here, we are very, very dry. We caught an inch of rain just a little bit less than a week ago, and things are already starting to curl here again today. So this is kind of what the check looks like, and pretty typical of most corn in this area. So here we have Invita. Like I said before, you can drastically see the difference in the color of these plants. Down on the bottom, we're seeing noticeably less potash firing from the drought stress, as well as nitrogen firing as well. So there is a little bit as we get back in here, but it is drastically better in the Envita treated piece. And I think what we're seeing here is that nitrogen is able to get into that plant through air, through the bacteria, and the bacteria fixing nitrogen within that plant. And what you're seeing is, being the drought conditions we've had, we don't have enough water, didn't a couple weeks ago, to get nitrogen and potash and some of these nutrients into these plants. And Invita kind of helped mitigate that stress by supplying that nitrogen source when the plants are short. So, like I said, we've seen a little bit of an increased grain development. The ears are a little bit bigger at this point. Couple ears you can find are a couple more kernel rolls around on average than some of the other stuff, but definitely noticeably a little bit further maturity wise. So here I'm in IONfx, treated on 4296. So this is right next to the Invita rows. There's 8 rows here, and we see there is a little bit of firing, but it's not as high up the plant as the check. Like I said before, the brace root development is a little bit better on the IONfx. You get a little bit of a larger root system with it. Grain maturity is a little bit ahead too, similar to the Invita piece. So kind of the stress mitigation piece of IONfx has really been kind of evident here. We haven't seen as much curling when we've been drought stressed. I don't have a picture of that here today because we had adequate rain here about 4 or 5 days ago. But we are seeing a lot less curling when we get to those days that are 90 to 95 degrees, and a lot less drought stress is evident when we hit those days. So here we're looking at NutriQuire. This is a new product to Legend in 2023. So as you can see, we see less potassium firing from that bottom. We're 1 to 2 leaves up, a little bit, maybe 3 in a few plants here, but considerable less firing than we see in the check. This has been pretty typical of the fields that I've seen of guys that have this on. We've seen a lot less firing. Haven't really seen much in the grain development side of things yet, but what we're seeing here is we're getting that effect of that bacteria able to free up some of that potassium and phosphorus in the soil and keep these plants growing longer throughout the day from having to cannibalize themselves to stay alive. So pretty typical of what we've seen kind of all over.